I ran away from my abusive home as a teenager. I worked for years to turn my life around and finally bought a house. When I did, my family returned, demanding I hand over my home to them because family comes first. My parents are currently forcing me to pay them $2,000 a month to park my car beside their house. They know I'm going to go homeless if I can't park here, so they're deliberately draining every cent I have and are actively trying to make me homeless. As far as why my own parents are doing this to me, the reason is very simple, but simultaneously very disgusting. It's the exact reason they've already used to ruin my life before, and it makes my blood boil. At least it used to. Because no longer am I the naive and sad kid who believed that if he tried just hard enough, maybe, just maybe, his parents would actually love him. You see, my parents are monsters, and to understand why I will dance on their graves the second they drop dead, we need to go back to when I was a kid. I have a brother 5 years younger than me, and there's no better example of our relationship than when he got a skateboard for his 8th birthday. He claimed he wanted one, but quit after only using it once. I then became interested in skateboarding a few months later, but he decided to give skateboarding another shot, conveniently only when I wanted to ride it. He never did end up practicing, and would literally take it outside just to walk around with it in his hand for an hour. My parents were fully on his side, saying that him wanting to use it at the same time as me was not ill will on his part, but just coincidence. That one example perfectly illustrates my childhood. In fact, my parents' favoritism was so bad, my extended family members got involved by accident. My grandmother noticed my bruises and my ragged clothes whenever I came to visit her, all whilst my brother wore designer by 10 and had not a scratch on him. My grandmother was badass, and I remember she slapped my dad because of his favoritism, warning him that she'd whip them into shape herself if he didn't cut it out. Things were better after that, until 3 months later when my dad conveniently got a job opportunity he couldn't pass up, halfway across the country. When that happened, I started lashing out. I began yelling at my parents that I hated them, that I wished they and my brother were dead. My mom slapped me and told me to apologize to him for speaking about him like that. I was furious, and later that same day, I did the thing that started this whole mess. My brother was on the phone with Grandma, lying through his teeth about how I, yes me, was doing so better, and I just started yelling, "Grandma, he's lying, don't listen to him please, they're still hitting." Click. My brother hung up the phone and went to tell my parents. He lied, and even told them I tried to wrestle the phone out of his hand. That night, my mom and dad laid hands on me like never before. I was used to a bruise here or there, but this time it was different to anything I've experienced. Blow after blow after blow, even after I passed out. I'm positive they thought they culled me. I think they panicked, but instead of calling the ambulance, they put me in the bathtub and left me there hoping I'd wake up. I was 17 at the time. I miraculously woke up that night in the bathtub full of cold water, and in that moment, I made the hardest decision of my life. I packed all my things and left. I had no plan, no money, and no food, but I was still certain being homeless would be better than living with my parents and my brother. And the crazy part is that I was right, until I wasn't. Because even though I lived on the streets for the first few years, committing petty theft to get food and blankets, I eventually found a job and busted my butt to build a life for myself. I found my own place, got therapy, and I truly believe I overcame all my PTSD and trauma. And that was when the universe decided to play one last trick on me, the pandemic. I lost my job, the majority of my savings, and my apartment. I was back at square one. I had nothing but a truck and a cheap camper van to my name. And so, 15 years after leaving my parents, I was forced to come back and grovel at their feet for help. I remember my dad opened the door, and he looked amused. He chuckled and asked if the worm was back to beg for dirt, and my mom had a similar reaction. She called me pathetic and spit on my shoe, saying I'm lucky she's not beating me like she used to for having the nerve to show up here. I told them I was here for just one thing, to ask if I could park my camper van at their house. Surprisingly, they said yes, but under one specific condition. You see, my brother still lived with them, now with his wife, and he was down financially. The condition was that every month, I'd pay $2,000 as a thank you to him for letting me park my camper van. Speaking of my brother, I found out that he and his wife have 4 kids. Their first when his wife was 23, the second a year later, the third 2 years after that, and she just delivered their 4th a couple months ago. I also learned that she refuses to work, despite having a university degree in business management that my parents paid for, and that my dad happily watches the kids all day without complaint. This means their finances depend entirely on unemployment checks. Either way, when my parents told me how much I'd have to pay, I was baffled. Their house sat on nearly an acre of land with plenty of space for my truck. When I pressed my parents about why they were really forcing me to pay, they claimed they had no room and didn't want me there since we haven't gotten along in years. My father crossed his arms and said, "You chose to move out. You can't come running back the minute things get tough. We're not running a charity," my mother said coldly. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to leave. My brother and his wife thought it was hilarious that I had to live in my truck, pointing and calling me a homeless loser. CL even took pictures, though thankfully she never posted them online. This is what happens when you don't plan properly. My brother smirked as I drove away, my possessions rattling in the back of my truck, my dignity in tatters. That first night parked in a supermarket lot, I barely slept from fear someone might break in. Every passing car, every distant shout made me sit up in alarm. The next morning, a security guard knocked on my window and told me I couldn't stay there. Company policy, he said, though he looked sympathetic. Try the Walmart on Highway 16. They sometimes let people park overnight. Finding stable parking was incredibly difficult. No other relatives lived nearby, and all my friends were in apartments with strict parking rules. I was also emotionally attached to the area and didn't want to leave. I'd built a life here, had favorite coffee shops, knew all the shortcuts, had connections that might lead to future employment. For months, I lived a nomadic existence. I'd park in different lots each night, trying to be inconspicuous. I dealt with harassment from strangers, people claiming I was violating property rules when I wasn't, and even threats. One night, a group of teenagers banged on my camper and threatened to smoke out the homeless guy before a store employee scared them off. To keep my small refrigerator running, I'd sneak extension cords into outdoor outlets of commercial buildings. Not my proudest moments, but necessary. I had a solar charger for my phone, but needed electricity for my camper batteries. I'd slip into the bathroom of a 24-hour gas station at dawn to brush my teeth and wash my face, buying a coffee afterward to thank the night shift worker who pretended not to notice my morning routine. I found places to shower occasionally. A gym membership helped with that. Public libraries became my sanctuary during the day, offering free Wi-Fi for job searches and a respite from the cramped confines of my truck. The librarians never asked questions when I'd arrive at opening and leave at closing, my backpack stuffed with my valuables that I couldn't risk leaving in the camper. TLDR, lost job and apartment during pandemic, converted truck into living space. Parents refused to let me park on their property unless I paid apartment-level rent. Lived nomadically for months. After months of truck living, I finally landed a job in a neighboring city. It wasn't ideal, a warehouse position with odd hours, but the pay was decent at $18 an hour, and they were hiring immediately. I was still receiving unemployment, but had no stable living situation, and I didn't want to be jobless when benefits expired. Plus, I was going stir-crazy with nothing to do but read, watch DVDs on a portable player, and scout for parking spots and accessible bathrooms. I had to scramble to prepare for the interview, washing my one decent shirt in a laundromat and getting a haircut at a budget salon. The hiring manager, Dave, seemed impressed by my eagerness and work history. "When can you start?" he asked, and I said, "Right now, if you need me to." He laughed, but appreciated my enthusiasm. When I got the job, I essentially lived in the back lot of the company building. My manager actually appreciated this arrangement since I was available for virtually any shift. "Most reliable employee I've ever had," Dave would joke to other staff. "Always on time because he's already here." He even let me detach the camper so I could drive without it. He allowed me to hook up to the building's power and water, and I worked unpaid Sundays as a form of rent. I showered at a friend's place or the gym, since my camper only had a portable toilet I avoided using except in emergencies. The camper was easy to heat in winter with a small electric heater, but summers were brutal without AC. The metal shell would trap heat like an oven, and I'd often sleep with the door partially open on hot nights, a bug screen my only protection. I eventually bought a used portable air conditioner to make it tolerable, though it consumed a lot of electricity and made an awful racket. I earned substantial overtime and learned valuable skills from coworkers. Rick from shipping taught me to operate the forklift. Maria from inventory showed me their tracking system. I became known as the guy who could fill in anywhere. Earlier this year, I was promoted to supervisor with a much better salary of $26 an hour plus benefits. That first paycheck as supervisor felt like winning the lottery. After 2 years of living in my truck, watching every penny, and dreaming of stability, I could finally afford something better. The pandemic was largely behind us. The economy was recovering, and I had steady employment with growth potential. That's when I decided I needed something more permanent. The trauma of losing my apartment taught me I needed long-term stability. I found a 3-bedroom manufactured home just 2 miles from work and somehow negotiated $10,000 off the asking price by pointing out some minor issues that needed repair and offering to fix them myself. I used nearly my entire savings for the down payment and secured a mortgage. Finally, I didn't have to live in a truck. I had enough space to set up my camper in the backyard as a guest house or storage. Moving day was emotional. I didn't have much to move, just my few remaining possessions from the camper. My first night in the house, I slept on a borrowed air mattress in an empty bedroom, but it was the best sleep I'd had in years. I could stretch out fully. I could use the bathroom without planning a trip to a gas station. I could cook on a real stove instead of a camping burner. Over the next few weeks, I furnished the place slowly and inexpensively. Thrift store finds, clearance items, and a few pieces from online marketplaces. Each addition made it feel more like home. A comfortable couch, a small dining table with 4 chairs, a decent bed, simple bookshelves for the few books I'd kept. Nothing fancy, but everything was mine, paid for, and not at risk of being taken away. TLDR, after months of homelessness, got a warehouse job that let me park on company property, worked my way up to supervisor, saved money, and finally bought a modest manufactured home. After settling in, I proudly posted about my new home on Facebook. Nothing fancy, just a simple post. After 2 years of living in my truck camper, I finally have a real home again. Hard work and perseverance paid off. I included a few photos of the exterior and my sparsely furnished living room. The post got lots of supportive comments and congratulations. Big mistake. A few weeks later, my parents, my brother and his family showed up completely unannounced. I never gave them my address, so they must have either stalked me or gotten it from someone else. I suspect my cousin inadvertently leaked it when he asked for my address to send a housewarming gift. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was enjoying the simple pleasure of watching a football game on my newly purchased secondhand TV when the doorbell rang repeatedly. Opening the door revealed my entire family standing there, with forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Surprise!" my mother exclaimed with false cheerfulness. "We thought we'd come see your new place." Before I could even respond, they pushed past me and entered my home without being invited. My father grunted a greeting as he passed, while my brother's children immediately scattered throughout the house, their shoes still on, tracking dirt across my clean floors. They barged in like they owned the place and started exploring every room. My sister-in-law kept flashing this creepy smirk that I later understood all too well. She ran her fingers along my kitchen countertop and commented, "Not bad quality for such a cheap place," her tone dripping with condescension. My parents kept commenting on how I had too much space for someone with no family, while my brother remarked how it was larger than our parents' house and closer to his job. "How convenient," he said, measuring the living room with his eyes. "This is nearly twice the size of our living space at Mom and Dad's." Red flags everywhere. "This second bedroom would be perfect for the boys," Syl said loudly while peeking into one of my spare rooms. "And the master has enough space for our king bed." I frowned, confused by her comments. "Who wants lemonade?" I asked, trying to redirect everyone to the kitchen, where I could at least contain the chaos. My brother's youngest was already pulling books from my shelf and dropping them on the floor. Eventually, my brother asked to speak with me privately. Everyone else immediately left the room. Clearly, they'd planned this. My brother, let's call him Trevor, said the house was too much for just me and that I should let his family move in because Sil was pregnant with their fourth child and my place was closer to her job. He suggested I could live in my camper outside while they took over the main house. "Look," Trevor began with practiced casualness, "I've been thinking, this place is really too big for just one person, especially someone with no real family obligations." He emphasized the word real, as if my existence alone wasn't legitimate. CL and I have been struggling with space at Mom and Dad's, and with the new baby coming, it's only getting worse. I started to respond, but he raised his hand to stop me. "Just hear me out. Your camper is perfectly fine. You lived in it for 2 years, right? It would make so much more sense for us to use this house, and you could park your camper in the backyard. It's a win-win." Trevor never mentioned paying rent. He started listing changes, rules, and even curfews, as if I wouldn't be allowed to enter my own house without notice. "We'd need to redecorate, of course. SEL has a whole Pinterest board ready, and we'd need you to give us advance notice before coming inside, maybe text us an hour before. The kids get anxious around unexpected visitors. If it weren't my brother, I'd think the person had lost his mind. But Trevor was spoiled rotten by our parents his whole life. Nothing in his experience had ever taught him that he couldn't have whatever he wanted, especially if it belonged to me. I tried responding, but he kept talking over me as if my opinion didn't matter. "The older boys will need their own bedroom. They're at that age where they need privacy. Syl and I will take the master, obviously, and we'll use the third bedroom for the baby and our youngest. We'll need to replace this flooring soon. It's not really child-friendly. Oh, and we'll need a fence installed for the kids' safety." He continued rambling about paint colors and furniture placement, while I stood there in stunned silence. There was absolutely no way I would rent my house to him or his obnoxious SIL. I've seen similar situations in online videos, but never imagined experiencing it myself. I discreetly started recording on my phone. Trevor didn't notice or care, and continued ranting about why he deserved my house, then extended his hand like we had an agreement. "So, when can we start moving in? This weekend would be ideal. CL already gave notice at work since this place is too far from her current position." That's when I finally found my backbone and shouted, "Hell no!" Trevor stumbled backward in shock. I'd rarely raised my voice to him because our parents always punished me for it, but this was my house, not theirs. I stood up and told him my property wasn't available for takeover, and it wasn't my fault he kept having kids and couldn't afford to move out of our parents' place. "Are you serious right now?" I continued. "You show up unannounced, barge into my home that I worked years to afford, and then suggest I should just hand it over to you and live in my truck again? Have you completely lost your mind?" Trevor got right in my face and said I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family. "You don't understand what it's like to have real responsibilities," he hissed. "You've only ever had to think about yourself. Meanwhile, we're raising 4 children in a cramped space with no privacy." I laughed and said that was complete nonsense. I worked hard for this house. I lived in a truck for 2 years. I worked overtime every week, saved every penny, and finally bought this place with my own money. Your lack of planning doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. He started yelling that I had no spouse or children, so I didn't need the space. "What do you even need 3 bedrooms for? To store your comic books? We have actual human beings who need rooms." I pointed out he never even offered rent, meaning I'd be covering the entire mortgage without being allowed to live in my own home. "So you expect me to pay for this house while living in my camper, while you and your family live here for free? That's beyond entitled. It's delusional." He yelled that he shouldn't have to pay rent because family comes first, and Mom and Dad said you were going to do this. His face reddened as he added, "After everything we've done for you over the years, this is how you repay us." "Everything you've done for me?" I replied incredulously. "Like what, exactly? Making my childhood miserable? Laughing when I became homeless? Refusing to let me park on our parents' property unless I paid extortionate rent?" I shouted back that our parents had no right to give away my house. Right on cue, my parents and SIL burst in and surrounded me, trying to pressure me into agreeing. There was a lot of arguing, but I kept hearing, "Just do it for Trevor," repeatedly. "You've always been selfish," my mother accused, her face twisted with disapproval. "Trevor needs this house more than you do. Why can't you understand that?" My father added, "Son, sometimes in life we have to make sacrifices for family. This is one of those times." Sil stood with her hands on her pregnant belly, her expression a calculated mixture of outrage and victimhood. "I can't believe you'd put your own comfort above the needs of your nieces and nephews. What kind of uncle are you?" I told them they had no say in my life or my property, and to leave before I called the police. Sil screamed that she was pregnant again, and I couldn't do this to her. I reminded her that I hadn't done anything to her. She just assumed she could take from me without permission. I called her a stuck-up witch who never respected me, and said I didn't care how many kids she had. "Having children was your choice," I said firmly. "I'm not obligated to house them. I'm not their father. You and Trevor are their parents. It's your responsibility to provide for them, not mine." That pushed her over the edge. She attacked me, landing one punch before Trevor restrained her, kicking and screaming. She demanded to be released so she could scratch my eyes out. I held up my phone and threatened to call police if they didn't leave immediately. "I have everything recorded," I warned, backing away. "If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police and pressing charges for assault." My parents gave up and told Trevor they were leaving. My mother said I had a week to come to my senses. I told her that wouldn't happen and not to return. I also warned SEL that I had recorded everything and would press charges for assault if she tried anything else. She stormed out, sobbing theatrically. My mother was last to leave, insisting I needed to do this for Trevor and Sil. I firmly told her it wasn't happening. "Mom," I said as she lingered in the doorway, "I want you to hear this clearly. I will never give up my home to Trevor and SEL. Not now, not in a week, not ever. If you come back to pressure me again, I'll call the police immediately." As they loaded into their vehicles, I could see them huddled together, likely plotting their next move. This wasn't over. I could feel it. They wouldn't accept no so easily after a lifetime of getting their way. TLDR. Family showed up uninvited to my new home. Brother demanded I give him my house and live in my camper. When I refused, SIL physically attacked me. I threatened to call police, and they finally left. As I mentioned earlier, I know this story sounds unbelievable. Similar stories exist online, but entitled families aren't exactly rare. By reading about my parents, you'll understand how they created this situation by spoiling my brother into the entitled person he is today. They've never given a real explanation for their favoritism, and I fear there isn't one. Some people can't justify choices like child favoritism. They just double down on supporting the child they chose. After kicking my family out, I immediately shared what happened on social media with our extended family. I knew they'd try to twist the story to make me the villain, so I acted preemptively with video evidence to back my account. I didn't post the entire recording publicly, but I sent clips to key relatives who I knew would spread the word. "I need to share something disturbing that happened today," my post began. "My brother and his family showed up unannounced at my new home and demanded I give it to them while I live in my camper outside. When I refused, SIL physically attacked me. I have video evidence of their behavior that I'm willing to share privately. I included a short clip of SIL's attack and my brother insisting I should give them my house. This worked brilliantly. Many relatives took my side immediately. My cousin Melissa called within minutes of my post. "I always knew there was something wrong with how they treated you," she said. "This is beyond belief." My uncle Jack commented publicly, "This is disgraceful behavior." My brother's name. "You should be ashamed of yourself." My parents, my brother, and SEL had a few supporters, but not many. My mother's sister thought I was being uncharitable and should find it in my heart to help family. My father's brother suggested a compromise where I could rent the house to my brother while I found another place, but most already knew how entitled they were. My grandmother called me in tears. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I always suspected they weren't treating you right, but I had no idea it was this bad. You don't owe them anything." Someone called me ranting that I was a horrible sibling who needed to make way for a real family. I hung up and blocked the number. Later, I discovered it was one of my mother's friends who had only heard their distorted version of events. A week later, my parents and Trevor showed up at my doorstep as threatened. They rang incessantly and pounded on the door until I answered through a crack, protected by security chains I'd installed. They tried forcing their way in, but I warned them I was recording and would call police if they attempted entry again. "This is harassment," I said loudly, making sure my phone captured everything. "You were told not to return. If you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police." My mother switched to her sickeningly sweet tone and asked if I was ready to let Trevor move in. "Honey, we're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Trevor's family really needs this space, and you're all alone here." I told them all to get lost and never return. She started crying and asked why I couldn't just do this for Trevor because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and said I didn't love him as a brother because he'd mistreated me for years with their encouragement. I told them they were terrible parents and he was a terrible brother and to leave before I called the police. "You don't mean that," my mother gasped, clutching her chest dramatically. "We've always tried to be good parents to you." "No, you haven't," I replied firmly. "You've always favored Trevor, and you know it. You let him abuse me growing up. You didn't care when I became homeless, and now you want to take away the home I earned through my own hard work. What kind of parents does that make you?" Trevor tried to interject, but I cut him off. "And you were a horrible brother. You broke my things. You flirted with my girlfriend until she left me. You laughed when I lost my apartment. Why would I ever want to help you?" Surprisingly, they left relatively easily, which should have been a warning sign. I thought the nightmare was over, but I was wrong. I returned home Friday evening to find a moving truck and Trevor's minivan in my driveway. They were moving their belongings into my house. Two men, friends of my father I assumed, were carrying a sofa toward my front door, which stood wide open. Boxes labeled kitchen and kids' room were stacked on my porch. Trevor just waved with a smug grin when he saw me. My heart raced as I slammed on the brakes and leaped from my truck. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, rushing toward the movers. "Stop right now! This is my house, and I haven't given anyone permission to move in." I demanded they stop, but SIL smugly said they were moving in regardless. With a condescending head tilt and puckered lips, she said, "It's okay, because your mommy allowed it. You should always listen to what your mommy tells you." "My mother has no authority over my property," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my rage. "This is breaking and entering. You need to leave immediately." Sil laughed and signaled to the movers to continue. "We're family, so it's not breaking and entering. Besides, your parents said it was fine." Seething with rage, I locked myself in my truck and called the police. When they realized what I was doing, Sil pounded on my window, screaming that I couldn't do this because she and Trevor needed the house. She wailed, "Why can't you just do this for Trevor?" I shouted back, "Fuck Trevor, it's my house, not his." She threatened to key my truck unless I stopped calling, which the 911 operator heard through my partially open window. I warned her I'd sue if she damaged my vehicle, and she retreated. "911, what's your emergency?" the operator asked. "My brother and his family are breaking into my house and moving their belongings in without my permission," I explained, my voice shaking with anger. "I need police here immediately. They've broken in and are refusing to leave." "Are they armed or threatening you?" the operator asked. "My sister-in-law just threatened to vandalize my vehicle if I don't let them stay," I replied. "She's extremely aggressive and has assaulted me before." When police arrived, Trevor, SIL, and their kids had locked themselves inside my house. I explained the situation and showed my driver's license with my current address. "This is my property," I told the officers. "I have the deed and mortgage documents inside. They showed up while I was at work and broke in." One officer, a tall man with a weathered face, nodded. "Let's go talk to them." When we approached the front door, I discovered they'd changed the lock. The drilled-out original lock and the Harbor Freight drill they'd used were still sitting on the porch. Could they have left more evidence? "Look at this," I said, pointing to the destroyed lock cylinder. "They actually drilled out my lock and replaced it." The second officer, a younger woman, picked up the drill with a gloved hand. "That's definitely breaking and entering," she confirmed, shaking her head in disbelief. "My parents arrived while I was talking to the officers. They immediately lied, claiming I'd agreed to rent my house to Trevor's family. There's been a terrible misunderstanding," my mother insisted, her voice quavering with false sincerity. "My son agreed to let his brother's family move in. He's just having second thoughts now." I said that was easily disprovable. I never agreed to any such arrangement. I explicitly told them multiple times they could not move in. I have videos of our previous confrontations where I clearly stated they were not welcome here. The female officer asked if I had documentation proving ownership. "My mortgage papers and deed are inside the house, which I can't access because they've changed the locks," I explained. "But you can verify my identity matches the property records." Trevor and Sil finally emerged with papers in hand, looking absurdly smug. Trevor's youngest clung to his leg, crying dramatically on cue. "We have a rental agreement," Trevor announced triumphantly, waving a document. They'd actually printed a fake rental agreement with a forged signature that looked nothing like mine. The agreement stated they would pay $300 monthly for the entire house while I lived in the camper, an absurdly low amount that wouldn't even cover a quarter of my mortgage. I informed them this was blatant fraud that could be easily proven and result in jail time, potential job loss for Trevor, and a lawsuit for any damage to my property. I also threatened to call Child Protective Services. "What kind of example are you setting for your children?" I asked loudly. "Breaking into someone's home, forging documents, teaching them that they can take whatever they want? Do you think CPS would approve of that parenting?" Trevor went pale with fear, but my mother stepped between us, insisting I should just live in the camper so they could finally have a family home. I yelled that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could give Trevor her house instead. "Why don't you move into a camper in your backyard and let Trevor have your house?" I challenged. "If it's such a reasonable arrangement, surely you wouldn't mind doing it yourself." My mother sputtered. "That's different. We've lived in our home for 30 years, and I've worked for 2 years to get this home," I countered. "What makes his needs more important than mine?" The police separated us, and I loudly detailed their crimes: breaking in by drilling my lock, forging documents, and assault, which I had on video. These were felonies I could ruin their lives with, and the only reason I hadn't was for the kids' sake. I gave them one chance to leave. The male officer spoke firmly to my family. "This is clearly this gentleman's residence. You need to remove your belongings immediately and vacate the premises. The alternative is arrests for breaking and entering, forgery, and criminal trespass." Finally realizing they couldn't force me, my mother surrendered and agreed to end this. She spoke quietly with SIL, who instantly began sobbing dramatically while tearing the fake rental agreement into confetti until an officer ordered her to pick up the litter. "Don't destroy that," the female officer said sharply. "That's evidence of attempted fraud." Sil reluctantly gathered the torn pieces, her mascara running down her cheeks. "This isn't fair," she whimpered. We need this house more than he does. The officers looked completely done with the situation. Trevor began instructing his kids to reload the truck while they cried. The oldest complained he wouldn't get his own room now. But Dad, you promised I wouldn't have to share with the baby anymore. They gathered in a clearly rehearsed group pose with quivering lips, Sil rubbing her pregnant belly, and Trevor making the saddest face possible while pleading, please don't do this. We need to live here. I remained firm and told them to keep packing. The children and Sil escalated their crying, and Trevor shouted, are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help out family. I burst out laughing and explained that what he wanted wasn't sharing but taking, and no amount of crying would change my mind because he wasn't my brother anymore, just an entitled brat who thought he could take whatever he wanted from me, like when we were kids. This isn't sharing, I said clearly, for the benefit of the officers and anyone else listening. Sharing would mean we both get something. What you wanted was to take my entire house while I live in a camper and still pay the mortgage. That's not sharing. That's theft. Trevor cursed at me until the police threatened to arrest him regardless of whether I pressed charges. I asked the officers to stay until everyone left, and they agreed. More patrol cars arrived, giving my family extra motivation to hurry. Watching them pack was surreal. They'd brought nearly everything they owned, clearly planning to move in permanently. Beds, dressers, toys, kitchen appliances, even photo albums and wall decor. They genuinely believed they could just take over my home without consequences. I demanded Trevor give me the keys to my new lock. He threw them down the street into a storm drain, but an officer made him retrieve them, getting filthy in the process. He slammed them into my hand with a glare. I hope you're happy, he hissed. My children will still be crammed into one room because of you. I ordered them all to leave and never return. My mother threatened to disown me, as if that would hurt me. I sarcastically replied, oh no, that means I won't get to come to holidays where you treat me like garbage anyway. If Trevor ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him a toenail clipping. So do what you always told me to do. Suck it up. My parents looked stunned, with the officers visibly judging them. If you want to expose toxic parents, confront them in front of law enforcement when they can't retaliate. My mother sobbed while walking away. My father looked like he wanted to hit me, and Trevor just held his defeated children. Sil was having a tantrum on my front lawn. This isn't over, she shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler. You can't keep doing this to us. I haven't done anything to you, I replied calmly. You've done this to yourselves. They quickly loaded everything back into the truck. Throughout the process, my mother kept trying to negotiate, saying Trevor could pay rent, or I could move back with them while Trevor rented my house. I told her to shut up and keep packing because I wanted nothing to do with any of them after how they treated me growing up. Before they left, I unleashed years of bottled frustration, calling out everything they'd done to me while the officers witnessed. I highlighted how they wouldn't even let me park my camper when I was homeless, but now wanted to kick me out of my own house so Trevor could live rent-free. The officers' expressions grew increasingly judgmental. When I was living in my truck and asked to park on your property, you demanded $850 a month, I reminded them. You called my camper an eyesore and laughed at my situation, but now you think I should give up my entire house and still live in that same camper? The hypocrisy is astounding. I publicly demanded to know what I'd ever done besides being born to deserve such treatment, why they wanted to snatch my success away the moment I achieved it. I told them I owed them nothing and would never ask anything from them again, since I was clearly just a doormat or cash cow in their eyes. What did I ever do to make you hate me so much? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Why has it always been about Trevor and never about me? Why, the moment I finally have something good in my life, do you try to take it away? My father turned red with embarrassment rather than anger, and my mother sobbed that she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed. They all were. I accused them of being terrible people who would go to hell for their actions. Had I confronted them privately, they would have denied everything and blamed me, but their facade had finally crumbled. As their vehicles disappeared down the street, the female officer approached me. I've been on the job 15 years, she said quietly, and I've never seen anything quite like this. You might want to consider a restraining order. After they left, I immediately posted the whole incident online. My parents were too embarrassed to defend themselves this time. While family opinion had been somewhat divided before, now almost everyone sided with me. Those who didn't simply remained neutral. No one believed the "we did it for Trevor" excuse anymore. My Aunt Laura, who had initially supported them, called to apologize. I had no idea it was this bad, she admitted. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you before. Surprisingly, neither my brother nor Sil blocked me on social media. Sil delivered her fourth baby in November, and they're still living with my parents. She posts passive-aggressive complaints about not having enough space every few weeks, obviously trying to guilt me. One particularly pointed post read, "Some people have 3-bedroom houses all to themselves, while families of 6 are crammed into tiny spaces. Funny how selfish the world has become." No one engaged with it except to ask why she didn't get her own place. I'm sure my parents are going crazy with 3 rowdy kids, an unstable Sil, my entitled brother, and a newborn, all under one roof. Maybe they should move into a camper in their backyard and let Trevor take over their house. They could do that for Trevor. TLDR. I shared what happened with extended family. A week later, my family tried again to take my house. When I wasn't home, they broke in, changed locks, and moved their stuff in. Police made them leave. Almost all relatives now support me. For those asking about security cameras, I'll install them when I can afford it. I'm still recovering financially from buying the house last year. I did replace all the locks with higher security versions that can't be easily drilled out. I also reinforced the door frames and added those security bars that brace against the floor. It's not a perfect solution, but it's better than nothing until I can afford a proper security system. Many of you suggested I should have had my brother and SIL arrested. The only reason I didn't was because their children need them, and Trevor would likely lose his job, leaving the family without income. SIL has a newborn baby. Neither belongs in jail, but that doesn't mean they escaped consequences. The police filed reports about the incident, and I obtained copies for my records. If they try anything similar again, those reports will establish a pattern of behavior that would make criminal charges much more likely to stick. Sometimes the threat of consequences is more effective than actually imposing them, especially when innocent children would suffer. After my social media posts about the incident, my SIL continued making passive-aggressive posts about needing more space. Another sleepless night with the baby in our tiny room, one read. If only someone in our family had extra space they weren't using. The comments were turned off on these posts, probably because people had started calling her out. I invited extended family to a Christmas Eve party at my new house. My parents weren't invited. I sent formal invitations to make it clear exactly who was welcome. My grandmother, several aunts and uncles, and multiple cousins all accepted. It felt good to finally host something in my own home after years of being a guest in others' houses. I spent days preparing, cleaning every corner, decorating with budget-friendly items, planning a simple but delicious menu. I wanted everything to be perfect for my first family gathering as a host. The morning of the party, I woke early to prepare the food and make final arrangements. The party was going wonderfully until, 2 hours in, my parents, my brother and SEL walked in uninvited with fake smiles, carrying gifts. They didn't even knock, just entered as if they belonged there. "Merry Christmas," my mother announced cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. We brought some appetizers and presents for everyone. The room fell silent. My grandmother, who had been telling a story, stopped mid-sentence. My cousin nearly choked on his eggnog. I immediately told them to leave, but before I could say more, my uncle, my mother's brother, stood up and shouted that they didn't deserve to be in my home after what they'd done. "Have you no shame?" he demanded. "After trying to steal his house, you think you can just walk in here like nothing happened?" Several relatives backed him up. "You weren't invited for a reason," my cousin Melissa added firmly. "This is incredibly inappropriate." My grandparents intervened, telling my parents that if they wanted to reconcile, it was far too soon. They expressed their disappointment and said my parents needed to treat me like an actual son if they ever wanted a relationship again. They told Trevor and Esil to stop the nonsense about my house. It would never become their home. "I've been quiet about this for too long," my grandmother said, her voice quavering with emotion. "You've always favored Trevor, and I've watched how it's hurt this boy his entire life. What you tried to do with his house was the last straw. You should be ashamed of yourselves." Sil threw another tantrum, crying that she should be living here instead of me, since she had 4 children needing space while I had no family. I couldn't resist pointing out that she was a terrible mother who let my dad handle most childcare while she drank, played on her phone, or spent Trevor's money. I even joked her baby would get drunk from breast milk, which admittedly went too far. "I apologize for that comment," I said immediately, noticing the shocked expressions. "That was inappropriate, but everything else I said is true. Dad watches your kids more than you do, Esil. Everyone knows it." Trevor's 7-year-old son started kicking and screaming at me, saying his dad told him I was the bad guy who made him cry and wouldn't let them live here. "You're mean," he shouted, his little face red with anger. "Dad says you have too much house and don't need it." Trevor pulled him away, but the rest of my relatives joined in with a family intervention against them. My Aunt Carol, usually the peacekeeper, spoke up. "Using your children as emotional weapons is despicable," she told Trevor. "Teaching them that they're entitled to take what isn't theirs is terrible parenting." Everyone was crying. CL, the baby, the children, and even Trevor nearly broke down from the verbal lashing. He just sat on my shoe ottoman looking completely broken, unable to make eye contact. They all left in defeat, and we resumed the party without mentioning what happened. Since most adults had been drinking, everyone stayed overnight. Some even slept in my camper. They were amazed I'd lived in it for 2 years and had many questions about the experience. "I can't believe you managed in such a small space for so long," my cousin remarked, while examining the camper the next morning. "I'd have gone crazy after a week." "You adapt," I explained. "After a while, it becomes normal. You learn to live with less, to organize efficiently. It wasn't ideal, but it taught me a lot about what I really need versus what I just want." After the holidays, SEL finally stopped posting about me and deleted her previous complaints. In January, she briefly posted about trying to convince my parents to get a camper so Trevor's family could have their entire house. But my parents firmly refused to be pushed out of their own home. "Some people understand the importance of family and sacrifice," she wrote cryptically. "Others clearly don't." She quickly removed the post and has barely posted since. Trevor can't afford to move out on just his salary, and SIL has realized no one's listening to her complaints anymore. Life has calmed down for me. I've invited friends over for poker nights despite being terrible at the game. I'm just happy to have a place where we can all gather, I told them, dealing another terrible hand. The company matters more than winning. I've rented out 2 bedrooms to friends, which helps cover my mortgage. They're respectful roommates who appreciate having a decent place to live at a fair price. We share cooking duties and have movie nights in the living room. It's the healthy, functional household I never had growing up. Sayel freaked out when she found out, and my mother cried about how I could have rented those rooms to Trevor's family instead. I reminded her they broke into my house, and there wasn't enough space for all of us anyway. You'd rather have strangers in your home than your own flesh and blood? My mother sobbed during a rare phone call. I'd rather have respectful roommates who pay rent and don't try to steal my house, I replied calmly. And they're not strangers. They're my friends. My parents haven't bothered me about the house since then. I'm doing well. My parents and Trevor, not so much. It turns out SEL is worse than I thought. Trevor's youngest child isn't actually his. CL had an affair, something a few commenters predicted months ago. The truth came out when the baby's features became more distinct, and he didn't resemble Trevor or any of the other children. A DNA test confirmed what many had suspected. She's been kicked out of the family, and Trevor recently finalized the divorce, which went in his favor since we live in an at-fault state. Trevor successfully removed his name from the baby's birth certificate. After the Christmas confrontation, my parents and Trevor finally stopped listening to SIL. They've started attending church, perhaps because I said they'd go to hell for their actions. My parents even came to personally apologize after seeing animated videos of my previous posts online. They acknowledged their narcissism and admitted to wronging me terribly. We've been terrible parents to you, my mother admitted, her eyes downcast. We can't undo the past, but we want you to know we recognize our failures. My father, always a man of few words, simply said, "I'm sorry, son. I was wrong." I appreciated their apology, but maintained my boundaries. "Thank you for acknowledging what happened," I replied. "It means something to hear you admit it, but rebuilding trust will take time, if it happens at all." Trevor and Esil's marriage collapsed spectacularly. Without me as a scapegoat and after public humiliation, Esil's toxic behavior became obvious even to my family. She kept pushing for my parents to buy a camper so she could have their house, refusing to stop despite repeated rejections. "We're not leaving our home," my father finally told her firmly. "Not now, not ever. You need to find your own place or make peace with the current arrangement." When SEL didn't get her way, she took her baby and disappeared for days. When she returned, she was more bitter because nobody had caved to her demands while she was gone. She refused to attend church with the rest of them. "Why should I pretend to be religious when God clearly doesn't care about my situation?" she reportedly said. "If he did, we'd have our own house by now." Trevor eventually confronted SEL with DNA test results in front of our parents. The evidence against her was overwhelming. My parents demanded she leave immediately, and she went berserk, physically attacking everyone. Police were called, and SIL was arrested after scratching Trevor and our father, and even hitting her eldest child who tried to intervene. "You're all against me!" she screamed as officers restrained her. "None of you ever wanted me in this family." Sayel later showed up at my house, ranting incoherently about how I'd ruined her life by posting on Reddit. She claimed mothers with young children are sacred, and giving up my house shouldn't have been too much to ask. She tried to shove me and cover my mouth, but I warned her about my doorbell camera and threatened to call police. I verbally demolished her until she retreated, telling her to stop blaming me for her own actions. "Your problems are entirely of your own making," I told her as she backed toward her car. "Your affair, your entitlement, your terrible attitude, those are all your choices. I didn't make you do any of those things." I finally filed a police report about her harassment and assaults and obtained a restraining order, which was easily granted given her unstable behavior. Trevor went through a quick divorce, with SIL's affair partner even showing up to testify for her, claiming she sought comfort with him because Trevor was incompetent. The judge shut him down, calling him a hypocrite for claiming responsibility while asking for Trevor's money. "Sir," the judge reportedly said, "you participated in destroying this family, and now you want to avoid financial responsibility? The court doesn't look kindly on such blatant self-interest." Sayel ended up with partial custody, but rarely sees her children. Trevor hit the bottle hard after discovering the betrayal and showed up at my place one night looking destroyed. Despite everything, he's still my sibling, and I couldn't let him drive drunk. We spent the night playing Uno and Battleship in my camper while he processed his grief. "I don't know how I didn't see it," Trevor kept saying, shuffling the cards with trembling hands. "All the signs were there. Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see," I replied. "You trusted her. That's not a character flaw." As dawn broke, Trevor looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I never thanked you for not pressing charges when we tried to take your house. You could have ruined my life, but you didn't." I shrugged. "I did it for your kids, not for you." A month later, Trevor asked to borrow my camper. He'd given up his bedroom so his 8-year-old son could finally have his own space. I agreed since it was for the children's sake. I set up the camper in my parents' backyard, and though I miss it, helping my nieces and nephew feels right. I made Trevor agree on video to be responsible for any damage or maintenance. "I promise I'll take good care of it," Trevor said solemnly in the recording, "and I'll return it whenever you ask." "I'm trusting you with something important to me," I replied. "Don't make me regret it." Trevor now lives in the camper and seems okay with it. "It's actually kind of peaceful," he admitted during a rare phone conversation. "No one bothers me out here. Extended family call me the good sibling Trevor doesn't deserve." Getting rid of SIL was the first step in healing our family. While I still have little affection for my parents and Trevor after a lifetime of mistreatment, I won't let the children suffer. They've warmed up to me since SIL left, and I'm finally enjoying being an uncle. My mother handles most childcare and tries to stay on my good side. My father remains quiet around me, but is no longer hostile. I'm maintaining healthy boundaries while moving forward. Life continues to improve. I might start dating again soon. I'm not getting any younger. My roommates have become good friends, and we've established a comfortable routine in our shared home. I've even started a small garden in the backyard, something I've always wanted but never had space for while living in apartments or my truck. The camper sits in my parents' yard now, though I miss it sometimes after living in it for 2 years. It represented both my lowest point and my resilience, a reminder that I survived when everything was taken from me. Perhaps someday, I'll actually use it for proper camping, something my parents never allowed when I was growing up. Maybe next summer we could take the kids camping, I suggested to Trevor recently. Show them how to fish and build a campfire. Trevor seemed surprised by the offer but nodded. They'd like that, especially after everything they've been through. My parents, my brother, and the kids are staying clear of me, returning to acting like I don't exist, which is fine by me. If anything significant happens again, I'll update. But for now, I'm enjoying my hard-earned peace.